What if I told you the legal profession, a very traditional industry, is in the middle of a quiet revolution, and at the center of this change is artificial intelligence? Today, I'm joined by two leaders who are driving innovation in their own fields, and they're here to show us how they use AI in their workflows, what works, what doesn't, and what it means to be a lawyer in the age of AI. So without further ado, let's dive in and meet our guests. Thank you for joining me, Sara and Stephanie. I am very excited about this conversation, and I'm so curious to learn how you use AI in your workflows and how you see the legal profession evolving in the age of AI. So, Stephanie, why don't you introduce yourself?
Hi, thank you for having us. I'm Stephanie Goutos, Head of Employment Law Innovation at Gunderson Detmer. I started out my career litigating employment, class, and collective actions and advising employers across a bunch of employment issues. And along the way, I found myself constantly questioning how we as lawyers work and looking for just smarter and more efficient ways to practice law. And so that curiosity led me into knowledge management, which eventually over time expanded into firm-wide innovation leadership. And I had the opportunity to lead the deployment of firm-wide solutions across 1,800 people, 62 offices, and pilot a bunch of cutting-edge tools, including some that leveraged AI. And I realized how much I really loved building solutions to tough problems. And so when the opportunity came along to join Gunderson and help build out the employment law practice with Natalie Pierce, it felt like this perfect fit, right? Like here was a firm that they're not just talking about innovation, but they're living it right alongside clients who are literally building the future of work. And so that alignment between that client mission and the firm mindset was very exciting to me. And now I focus on how AI is transforming both the legal profession and the workplace. And I'm super passionate about taking all of what's going on, turning it into like practical, useful information for attorneys and business leaders. So just a short intro this morning.
That is quite the journey, Stephanie. Sara, tell us something about yourself.
Sure. Thank you so much for having me. I'm Sara Miro. I'm currently the Director of Knowledge and Innovation at Sullivan and Cromwell. I actually started my career here at Sullivan and Cromwell about 16 years ago. I was a litigator and practiced for many years. And all through that time, leveraged the technology that we had available to do a lot of the day-to-day tasks that a litigator would do in their practice. About 6 years in, I realized, I was hearing from a lot of other people at different firms, there were different technologies that they were using, different processes and different ways that they were being more efficient. And I wondered, why don't we have any of those sorts of techniques and tools here? And so I approached our leadership at the time. And, they had been thinking about the same thing. And so it was sort of a perfect timing and alignment where they asked me if I would lead up sort of technology initiatives and knowledge management for the group. And then a few years into it, realized this is really a firm-wide initiative. And so I became Director of Knowledge Solutions, really leading technology initiatives across the firm. And now in the last sort of 2 years, we've taken on an even bigger bite at the technology apple with leveraging artificial intelligence, testing numerous tools and rolling those out across the firm to all of our users, lawyers, and business professionals alike. And so it's been a really interesting journey and one that I think continues and will continue to evolve as we're seeing new technology come to bear.
Wow. So it's actually for me an opportunity to learn a little bit about the legal profession itself and how technology has been used and how now artificial intelligence is being used. So both of you have different sort of backgrounds and lanes in the legal profession. So your workflows and the way you work, the clients you interact with, the work you do day to day is very different. And with both of you experience, both of you have kind of been in the trenches of the legal industry and you have worked with technology leading up to today, AI. What was your first kind of aha moment where it shifted your outlook from really just like day-to-day practice of law or workflows to more reimagining how things can be done with artificial intelligence?
Even though it's a little cliche, my aha moment was really the first time that I dug into and started experimenting with ChatGPT. I remember thinking that this will change everything for knowledge workers.
All right. Yeah. Sarah, what about you?
Yeah. So, I'll go back a bit. I was lucky enough to work early on in my career in knowledge and innovation at SDC with some data scientists that we actually incubated here at the firm and in 2017. And so there was a lot of exposure at that time between 2017 and 2018 to large language models. So this sort of new technique that was part of machine learning and artificial intelligence, but sort of the next wave of how these models would perform. And it was before there was anything generative coming out, but I was following closely because of my work with those two data scientists, but following closely the path OpenAI was taking, like probably much lesser known company at the time, but they were rolling out GPT-3, which was okay. There was a few apps running it in the background. You could generate, the next line of a story if you gave enough information, but it really wasn't anything that you would be writing home about, or you would be saying, it's going to transform any practice, especially some, practices as complex as legal. Then we got into 2020, and I remember it was after a LegalTech conference. I just gotten an email from OpenAI saying DALL-E is available. You were on the wait list, and now you get to play around with DALL-E. And I started generating images, and I was like, wow, this is amazing. Like, look around, passing it around the table. We were all eating, and everybody was kind of like, oh, yeah, okay. Like, okay, generate pictures, big deal.
It's cool. What do I do with it, right?
Yeah. And then, but it was then just a couple years later where ChatGPT launched. And, then at that moment, I was like, wow, this is really going to change everything. It's not just generating the next line of my, story, but I tell it, come up with a story for a boy named Jack that likes bears and, fishing. And it would generate a whole 5-paragraph story that you could read to your child. This is really going to move the needle. And so, I think it was a lot of anticipation and a lot of sort of waiting for that right moment to say, this is actually something that we should look at for our field. And it was definitely that time.
I think some lawyers or knowledge workers may not have even realized that they used AI before ChatGPT, right? But that's not the first time that AI came into the legal market. It's just the first time that I think it became really mainstream because generative AI was just such an accessible way for people to use natural language and ask questions and talk to it as though it's almost a human. So I think that is a big piece of why it simply exploded. It was just so easy to use.
That's so true. Like the couple of themes that both of you mentioned. One was just the experience of how easy it was. You can just open ChatGPT and ask it questions. But Sarah, you've seen the evolution. You work with data scientists. So one of my last roles when I was at Microsoft was to help financial services clients build very complex machine learning solutions for like analytics and predictive analytics, pre-generative AI. Those solutions were great. They worked, but they were expensive to build. They were complicated to understand. And then ChatGPT comes around where you can just ask it questions and like it evolved into something that everybody can use. I think for me, it was that moment where I said, this is going to change knowledge work forever. The definition of learning knowledge work is going to evolve. And especially with industries like the legal profession, like legal work is very high stakes. So there's a lot of considerations legal professionals have to take when adopting technology. And keeping that in mind, historically, the legal industry has moved cautiously to adopt new technologies. Sarah, does it feel like this moment is different? Does it feel like this time it's going to be faster? It's going to bring in more people?
Yeah, 100%. So to your point earlier, machine learning techniques in different types of legal work, wasn't new. We've been working with machine learning techniques in e-discovery for over a decade already. And that process to shift from a linear review where you're looking at every single piece of material, email, an Excel spreadsheet, a document that's coming through, or sifting through a hard copy, right? That slowly changed. And the technology proved itself early on with machine learning, but it took a long time for the profession to accept this new form of technology, this new way of working. And it really wasn't until you had some judges that were blessing the use of technology assisted review for discovery, and regulators encouraging their lawyers that they were working with to use the tools. It wasn't really until that moment where you really saw a shift in the profession toward this tech, but it took a long time. Now, I think if we go back to November 2022, when everybody in the world was able to ask a query of ChatGPT, about 4 or 5 months later, Goldman Sachs put out a report that said, legal is the first profession that's going to be fully transformed by this technology. I think that made the profession perk up a bit, right?
Wow.
For sure.
Since then, we've had a lot more attention focused on technology than we've ever seen before.
True.
Yes, I would say the same. I think Sara and I, we go back and forth on this a lot, and we debate, what's the right approach and what are the right guardrails, because legal is unique in that we have the attorney-client privilege, right? That is completely non-negotiable for us as legal professionals. And I think AI tools definitely introduce risks around confidentiality and data exposure. So it's important that your lawyers understand not just how to use the AI, but when. When is it appropriate to upload documents, especially with sensitive information, into the system, and what guardrails are there or what guardrails are missing?
So that's a great point you make, Stephanie. So digging a little deeper into that. So there's kind of two aspects of that security privacy paradigm. One is the responsibility of the frontier model makers to ensure that the AI is built the right way, it responds the right way. And then the other is the responsibility of the user, or in this case, somebody in the legal profession itself. On the latter, is how important do you see is that sort of education in legal firms about when to use it, crystal clear guidance on when not to use it, and also how to use it in certain ways?
I mean, it's absolutely essential. Before we allowed our attorneys to use ChatGPT, which was an application, a homegrown application that we put out 2023, we had everyone take training courses and certify that they would comply with our AI policy. AI sounds very confident even when it's wrong. And I think that can be dangerous in the practice of law. So we always say trust but verify, and everything that is generated by AI, you need a human to verify it. And it's very similar to the obligations we have under the model rules to supervise the work of a junior attorney, right? Or a law clerk. Like, you have to supervise the AI in the same way that you would supervise a junior employee.
Right. That's a very important point. And I think that applies to every profession, anyone who uses AI, because it sounds so confident, it makes you trust it. And when you trust, it can be a little bit sneaky, because hallucinations sound confident as well. And I say that to everybody. I'm like, you have to verify everything, even if it's not, even if you're not dealing with facts or factual information. If it's just strategy, brainstorming, you still have to verify sources. You have to kind of use your own intuition. Now, talking about tools and platforms, there's so much going on. Sara, like you said, the pace of development is crazy. There's another tool to do the same thing every week. So how do you guys stay current with all the developments? And what are some areas or tools you think that are changing workflows in the legal profession?
It's a good question. And, it actually, the answer changes depending like month to month, because what we're seeing is there's just as many AI experts coming out and creating content for people to learn about. And we're lucky in our profession for legal technology and innovation and knowledge management that we have a really robust community where there's a lot of opportunities to learn outside of work. So different conferences, different gatherings of professionals to exchange ideas. And so those are always great to join and like speak human to human to people. But I spend a lot of time listening to podcasts when I'm traveling to and from anywhere. And there are a few that I really enjoy. And really the ones that I enjoy the most are actually outside of the legal field. And so
Right.
they just talk about VC investment and what startups are hot and what, different techniques data scientists sort of looking at. I read a lot of research papers, which is kind of boring, but now you can throw them all into ChatGPT or
Right.
Claude for a quick summary. But I think staying up to date on the tech is just as important as staying up to date with point solutions for your particular practice. And I have to say, I do really like LinkedIn. I think you can find for all the noise that you can find on LinkedIn, I think you can really find a lot of great resources, and there's a lot of professionals that are posting there and posting free content, and links to other available content. And so I try to stay up to date with all those various methods, but it's tough. It's like, to your point,
It is. It
I
is.
think we had to, what did I say earlier? We were going from 2022 where there wasn't a new model yet. And now it's like, you can't even go, 18
A
minutes
week.
without a new update or something.
Yeah, yeah. It's the pace is on fast forward. I often joke when someone asks me this question that I'm building a robot in my garage to clone myself, because it really feels like that's the only way to keep up some days. But
Yeah.
what Sarah said is exactly right. You learn from not just the legal industry, but other industries. I do the same thing as far as listening to podcasts. I just finished reading Empire of AI, which I found to be really fascinating. I read articles, blogs, anything on social media or Substack or Reddit, you name it. I probably read it.
I'm going to
Go ahead.
interrupt Stephanie just to say one of my favorite things to read each week is Stephanie's weekly AI bites.
Yeah.
And so
Oh,
Stephanie does
thank
a
you.
great job of posting really relevant content that, there's always articles that she's posting about and information that I haven't heard of yet. And so she's really
Yeah.
does a good job of keeping current with legal issues and employment issues around AI. And so that's a really great resource.
Absolutely. I love it. I
Thank
love
you.
Stephanie's weekly AI bites. And you have that legal context there, which, it's so fascinating listening to both of you talk how you go outside of your profession to look for content that is, related to technology, but not necessarily focused on legal. For me, reading Stephanie's weekly bites is like reading the legal context of it, which is kind of outside of my purview. And
Interesting.
it always gives me new things to kind of think about. And also learn about what's going on in the legal space there's so much stuff going on. So kudos, Stephanie. You write that every week. It's always timely and you've been doing it for a while. So our viewers, you're going to find a lot of value from reading that.
Thank you. And yes, it is human generated. I, of course, use AI to my advantage to compile the articles, but I really enjoy during the week, like I'll see something that I think is relevant to AI in the future of work, which is what I focus in on. And I just have a Google Doc where I keep it all. And I, at the end of the week, pick the top 5 to 8 stories that I think are really impactful and try to distill it down into what I call TLDR, too long didn't read bites, because I know everyone's so overwhelmed with all the information, myself included. So just a
Yeah.
quick snapshot of what happened that week.
That's fantastic. All right. So now we're talking about sort of tools, platforms, how we consume information and learn about them. What's your go-to AI tool or stack of tools that you use? One thing you shared with me was a tool you created called the AI Model Academy. It's super useful to understand what's the right tool for the job. So tell us something about this and how you use it.
Yeah, so the simple answer to what is my go-to AI tool is I don't have one. I describe it as more of a strategic AI toolkit, and I just leverage whatever model makes the most sense for the use case based on the different strengths and weaknesses of the models, which, as we all know, are changing sometimes daily. And so, yeah, I just put together sort of an overview of some of the popular models. And of course, this becomes out of date quite quickly, but it goes over kind of the high level TLDR, what's best for generating images or for coding or advanced reasoning. And so for me, I really think that approach is always going to be more powerful than relying on a single solution. A quick TLDR of my personal strategic AI toolkit. So for quick brainstorming and general tasks, I got to go with the OG, ChatGPT. It's really my go to for just quick brainstorming and general tasks. I think it helps solve that blank canvas problem, right? Like, where do I even start?
Right.
And I do really also like building GPTs. I find those quite useful. Claude is my thought partner for a more nuanced analysis. So if I'm working through like a tedious agency ruling or something that impacts multiple industries in different ways, for me, that's Claude territory. And I think of it as
Right.
my brainstorming partner. And it's just a little bit of a deeper level than a general chat. For building workflows for the lawyers at my firm, I use Deep Judge for anything that is important to have real time information or sourcing. Got to go with Perplexity for that one. And fun fact, that's how we met in the Perplexity Fellowship. But
Yes.
yeah, I really like the fact that you can easily verify where the information came from, and you can also filter it by type of source, right? So if you want academic papers or what's trending on social media, that's super easy to do. And Perplexity Labs is probably my secret weapon for creating interactive dashboards and research tools. I really do leverage the agentic browser comment quite frequently. Then I would
That-
say for generating visuals or presentations, Gamma I really like, or Beautiful AI. So you can just take bullet points and turn them into clean visual narratives quite easily. And then for generating standalone images, if you asked me a few weeks ago, I would have said Midjourney was my favorite. But recently, Google's Nano Banana is kind of pulling at my heartstrings. I've had a lot of fun experimenting with that. So that might be a tie. And then hot take, I also really like Grok for less generic or conventional perspectives on an issue. And I feel like it just helps me see things from a different angle. So that's kind of
Yeah.
my, in a nutshell, when I use what tool for what use case right now,
Yeah.
today.
Yeah. It's so interesting and it's so true. One tool can't solve for every problem, at least right
Right.
now. Maybe in
Yes.
the future, we might have a single tool that does it all for you. And it's
True.
important to use the right tool for the job. And I feel when people try to do certain things with a single tool and they don't get the output they're expecting, it's almost a deterrent for them to go back and use it
Yes.
again. So it's important to use the right tool. What about you, Sarah? What's in your toolkit?
Yeah, well, I should have gone first because I definitely am not using as many tools as Stephanie on the day to day. But my go-to still is ChatGPT. I really liked ChatGPT 5. I know there was some back and forth
Yeah.
in the world on the new model, but for me, I actually thought it was really great. I did see that there was more of the planning aspect that was going into
Yeah.
the model before it would respond to your prompt, and so we're finding it really powerful. I
Right.
do like Notebook LM. I think there's a lot of great use cases that you can leverage even for, it's a fun tool just for personal, but I think it's actually could be a very powerful tool even for certain business
Yeah.
use cases. And I was just speaking with somebody the other day saying, you could run someone's bio and professional accomplishments through it and actually generate a sort of podcast, when someone's retiring, or
Yeah.
when you want to give somebody a little bit of a, nice little gift, just uh, having two podcasters discuss the different accomplishments or something that happened in a matter. And so there's definitely a lot of value in a tool
Yeah.
like that.
Yeah.
And we're seeing definitely within legal, you're not going to find that one tool, even if it's a general purpose generative AI model, is going to solve for every problem that an attorney has, because a lot is really dependent on the data that's accessible to the
Yeah.
model. And so you will need point solutions that are going to be focused and keyed in on certain, really useful precedent for a particular practice or a particular task that practice group performs. And so bringing it back to, to legal, it's really important to sort of blend two different specialties, right? Knowledge management, precedent collection, data with this new technology for generating quick, efficient answers. And so really blending those two together and finding what is going to move the needle as far as getting information to people when they need it at the right time. I think, it's still a problem that we're trying to figure out, but the tools we have
Yeah.
at our disposal now are so powerful that it really is a bright future.
I'll just add one thing. Don't let Sarah fool you. She is one of the most knowledgeable people that I know on this planet when it comes to identifying, who is using what tool in legal. She has been to every demo. She knows the history of the company being founded, and she's just a wealth of knowledge. And we're always texting back and forth. Did you see this came out? Did you see this has new capabilities? And so I think just that conversation around it, and like we're always pushing each other and sharing the new tools that are coming out and our feedback. And that collaboration has been a really fun part of this whole AI journey.
You're flattering me, Stephanie. I'll take it back.
You deserve it.
For me, just listening, hearing this is so inspiring because both of you are experimenting. And I tell people the best way to learn this newfangled thing that is supposed to change the way we work and live is to experiment. And
Yes.
and in workplaces, not just in the legal profession, but any industry for that matter, creating that space for experimentation for employees is very important. And all obviously within the guardrails. Sarah, you mentioned Notebook LLM. I took the longest time to actually dive into Notebook LLM. And I did a few weeks ago. And you mentioned you read research papers. So I would read research papers too. Reading research papers is quite complicated and it's very dense. But I use that mind map functionality in Notebook LLM. You drop in a research paper, you create the mind map and just click on it, go to that section, ask questions. It is such a great way of exploring a dense document. And then you can convert it into a podcast. And they release the interactive mode. If you viewers, you haven't checked it out, is mind blowing.
Is it?
You can interrupt the podcast hosts and participate and ask a question about the document,
Oh my gosh.
which is just so fascinating. Is such a new way of learning, especially when it
And
comes
that's
to
what I was going to
dense
say.
information.
It's a new way of learning and it's a new way of interacting with tech. And so even with ChatGPT voice mode,
Yeah,
it's the first few times I tried it, it was a little off-putting. You sort of have to get your bearings. It's the only way that my 10-year-olds interact with ChatGPT now is through voice mode and
wow,
being able to interrupt. And so it's interesting to see to wonder how the younger generations are going to grow up with this tech and what they're going to be comfortable with. And so you can imagine a world where, you have sort of things that are listening to you as you're working through your day and picking up on
yeah,
different parts of your work and parts of your life and almost, hopefully surfacing the things that you need before you even know that you need them because it's understanding what's
yeah.
coming next in the cycle and it knows how you work. And so there's so many exciting things that to think about. And it's really, I mean, it's a new way of working for everybody at every level, at every age. It's a really
Yeah.
exciting time.
To your point, Sarah, it's such an interesting time where different generations are figuring out their own ways of interacting with this new technology. And with the pace of the development and the potential of this, there's a lot of responsibility that comes in. For me, I'm constantly thinking of what it means to be human in this crazy world of AI and where it's going to go. Responsibly using AI is very important. So now, Sarah, in your background, you've kind of worked at the intersection of innovation, technology innovation, and litigation. And from your perspective and experience, where can AI realistically sort of support litigators? And where do you think it can never replace the human touch?
A good question. I think what we are seeing now is that where AI, generative AI, large language models, and applications that use those tools have had the most success is in the e-discovery workflow.
Right.
And that's sort of, been the practice has been growing, right, ever since the advent of email, right? The amount of media and data that's created on a daily basis has exploded. You cut back, a few years ago where you have things like WhatsApp and Signal and ephemeral messaging. And those are all data points, data sources that when you're involved in a litigation are media sources that need to be collected and reviewed. And so you can imagine just the level of material that any one case be involved in any one case just has grown exponentially. And so the desire to cut through text-based communications with technology is definitely one that I think the legal profession for litigation is 100% focused on. And we've seen great
Mm-hmm.
success. And so if I go
Mm-hmm.
back to the work that we started doing early on with the incubated data scientists, the focus was to create a better first level of reviewing documents. I'm happy to say that the team that is incubated with the firm is now part of Epic AI Labs, and they're continuing that work that they're doing for discovery, review, and litigation practice with Epic. But
Mm-hmm.
we're seeing now a lot of providers that it's sort of table stakes to have a tool that's leveraging large language models that will cut through first level review of a large
Right.
volume of emails. And we're talking, millions of pages of
Right.
information. And so that definitely was a sore point for clients that are involved in massive litigation and have budget constraints when it comes to conducting a first level review. The reason I think that we've seen so much success so early on in first level discovery review work is because yes, we had technology assisted review for the past 12 or
Mm-hmm.
15 years, and so that method of reviewing documents was accepted. And so large language review application is sort of the next phase of that
Mm-hmm.
work. And then, the other thing is in discovery and then when using tar, you had the ability to really run assessments against the tech to analyze how well the tool is doing. And so if you
Right.
go back to technology assisted review, you have a subject matter expert that would review a certain number of documents, then you'd be able to compare those results against the results that the model was performing. And so there are similar exercises that you can do now where you have an LLM based review of documents. And so I think that gives the profession a little bit of relief that you can actually have metrics that you can point to show the precision and the recall, how well the model is performing against
Right.
human standards. Where I think we won't see technology taking over the legal profession is, and this is, I'll speak specifically to litigation, but I think it's really the profession as a whole, any type of legal work. It's really, it really is a human emotional relationship. The attorney-client
Right.
relationship is really one where that requires trust, it requires loyalty, it requires commitment. And I don't see that ever changing.
Right.
I mean, I think
Changing.
clients find solace in being able to rely on their human attorney to call up to ask questions, to guide them through very difficult legal moments in their lives, whether it be transactional
Right.
or litigation. And so I don't think we'll ever lose that piece of it. And I don't think we should lose sight of the fact that the legal profession is a rules-based profession. There are
Right.
laws and regulations and judge rules and regulator rules that we need to abide by. And just because there's a great new technology that comes to bear that can spit out text and have a conversation, we're not going to just push aside
Right.
all of
Yeah.
the rules of the practice that have been built over centuries.
And
Yeah.
that's such a great point. It also involves so much human intuition. You lead with empathy and intuition especially in a client relationship, and that cannot be replaced and should not be replaced by AI. But you can use AI to automate menial tasks, and where it can help you with like TAR or e-discovery, and then taking it to the next step with LLMs. It just changes workflows in a advantageous way where it gives the lawyers more time and mind space to focus on the human side.
Mm-hmm.
And Stephanie, in one of your publications, you also emphasize that, banning or ignoring generative AI is not realistic, right? But if you use it irresponsibly, it carries real risks. For example, using it for something that you shouldn't be using it. So Stephanie, how do you think we can strike that balance? Like embrace the efficiency gains of AI, but also ensuring that it protects the profession, the ethics, the human side of it.
Yeah, so I'll just echo first what Sara said. I completely agree. She took the words out of my mouth. That human emotional connection, I don't think will ever change in the practice
Yeah.
of law, and nor do I think that it should. I think that is really, what the practice is built upon. And I see AI as something that can augment the profession and the relationships, but it's never going to replace it. So putting that aside, I think, there are I think refusing to use AI at all can also create ethical issues and problems. And
Mm,
so in my paper, I write about this a fair amount, but the high level of it is that as lawyers, we have a professional responsibility under the model rules to keep up and stay abreast with changes in technology. And we saw that when e-discovery was coming out, right? And so the transition from reading cases and looking up everything in a physical book,
mhm.
transitioning to Lexis and Westlaw and shepherdizing your cases. That just became at a basic level something that all attorneys do to check that they have good case law. And I think in the same way now, with AI, it's just a little bit on, I guess, fast forward, there's a little bit more pressure, I think, because of all the unique aspects of generative AI and the pressure from some clients to use it. But yeah, I do think that refusing to use AI down the road actually could be an ethical issue in and of itself
Mm,
because we have an obligation not to charge excessive fees, right? And so
mhm.
at what point in time, if we're billing 10 to 15 hours for something that could be done in 12 minutes, when
Wow.
is that excessive? And
Right.
I don't know the answer to that. And I don't know that there is an answer to it yet, but I just think there's going to be this tension as we use these tools and integrate them more and more into our practice between the obligation to use the tools effectively, responsibly, and how the practice of law is structured as a business right now.
That is, I never thought of this point. As an ethical responsibility, using these tools in the proper way actually brings the profession forward. It's a great way to kind of think about it. And not just in the legal profession, everybody who's in any industry or job, there's a lot of fear around using AI. And it's natural for us as humans to deny it, push that away from
Yes.
us. Whereas embracing it just opens up so much opportunity for us to be human, for us to actually be human in our own work, our lives, and so on and so forth. So that's a great perspective. And we'll link your paper in the video description as well for people to take a look at it.
Cool.
Talking about approaching AI and accepting the fact that this is a technology here to stay and using it properly. Now, many lawyers have built careers on established ways of working, right? And that's not just the legal profession, that's any other profession. And there's always a little resistance to change in how we do things and how we operate. How do you approach introducing these new AI tools to professionals that have decades of experience doing the things they do in their own way?
Yeah, definitely as a profession, change is hard for everyone, right? I mean, I
Yeah,
don't know if you'll find anyone that I think us in the legal innovation sphere welcome some level of change, but where
right.
everything is changing all at once or so frequently that you can't keep up, that's an uncomfortable feeling for anyone. And so it's definitely very important, just when we're rolling out any new technology or any change within the firm to a group of professionals who are used to doing something a certain way. There's always a delicate balance of how much change and how much do we force the change and how quickly. With something like this generative AI tool where it really is a very different way to practice. There's almost a level of vulnerability you have to give up to the tool to
Mm,
understand how to work with the tool as an assistant or as a, communicating back and forth to trying to generate the right answers. That is not something that is innate for everybody, right? There's some of us where we'll be able just to communicate with the tool, understand the back and forth and how to get the best information out and incorporate it into part of our day. But for many of the professionals that we help support, there really needs to be a lot more direction and hand holding. And so
mm,
we've been taking the approach of offering trainings and office hours where when people need it, but really also letting people share their experiences with us because I am an expert in certain fields and certain ways of approaching technology, but the day-to-day use that a lawyer is going to get or business professional is going to get is going to vary, and we can't be everywhere at once, and so it's really important to
right.
just what we found is to insist on that open dialogue. We're sort of all learning together and understanding the best ways to use it. And telling someone, just use it for anything or ask it anything is not really very helpful. And so we've tried to be much more direct and focused in our approach to say, okay, for these practice groups or for this particular task or to get started, here are some tips. Here are some ways that you can utilize these tools. With a point solution that does one or two things, it's much easier, right? Because
Right.
this is the task that it's going to do. And a lot of times those tools will sort of direct you, or if you need to upload something, or if you need to add certain input or context. With the general models, more challenging, right? They can do so much, but they can also get it wrong if you haven't provided it with enough of the context. And so there definitely is a level of hand-holding and white glove
Right.
service that we found that we need to provide in order to get our users to not just try these tools, but actually adopt them as part of their workflow.
I agree. We actually take a similar approach. I think starting small and being mindful of what are the low stakes, high reward use cases that you can start with. I mean, I would never recommend starting with generating a critical brief, right? Like that's just not something that you want to start with. You might want to stress test some templates or summarize an article, just, lower hanging fruit so that people can get comfortable with the tools and the process, and then give them this safe space to really experiment where the stakes are low. It's not any confidential information. It's just general publicly available information, and then repeat until you feel comfortable enough going to that next level and the next tier of use cases.
That's quite insightful. And I think it's important to acknowledge that fact that prescriptive guidance and the space for experimentation is very important. And especially in high stakes professions like legal, it's way more important. And it also is, you have to find a balance between giving direct guidance and allowing the users to sort of explore. And the way you put it is really, impactful, where start with the low hanging fruit, try to get used to it, see what works best, how it interacts, and then sort of go from there. On that note, Stephanie, we know AI isn't perfect. There are days that I can't get anything done with it. So can you share an example where it fell short or didn't meet your expectations?
Sure. I mean, I think there's not just one example I would point to. I mean, it fails all the time, right? And I think that iteration process is the point, and I think
Right.
a lot of attorneys or business professionals let that fear that they're not going to get this perfect output stop them from trying and experimenting with it. So I think it's really just iterating is a part of this, and it's how you learn how to use the tools. And so as long as you're doing so in a responsible manner, failure is great. I mean,
Yeah.
why not, have it generate something completely ridiculous or hallucinate, and then you realize that, you could prompt in a different manner, or you could put better guardrails, or your system prompt could, have a text in there that eliminates this in the future. So I think failure is the only way that we're all going to learn how to effectively work with these tools.
Yeah.
Yeah, I completely agree. I mean, we definitely are the new, R&D department, and
Yeah.
really our users are part of that too. It's a big
Yeah.
experiment. And what I think also is, even if you have, let's say, a bad experience or you don't get the responses that you thought you would, or in the format that it's not just a learning experience for the next time, but it's also, what I find is it gets your own brain sort of thinking of new ideas and new concepts, and
Yes.
just even by virtue of not getting the right answers, right? Sometimes just
Right.
sort of talking things out human to human can really
Yeah.
help people to form and generate new ideas. And I think that's, when you don't have the benefit of being able to talk to a teammate, being able to sort of run some ideas through a chat GPT or, a different generative model may sort of spark some other creative juices in the user.
Right.
And so I think you can look at those sort of silver lining of when you don't really get exactly what you expect out of it. I think it would trigger more sort of creative workflows for the user. And then trial and error. I mean, we do that on the day to day with the tools that we're using now. I think we just don't think about it in the same way, because the way that these tools present is so different from what we're
Right.
used to. But there are many tools that fail, right? That we
Yeah.
have that don't work just so,
Sure.
or that don't provide the right results. And, you know, it, you at the end of the day, and it's not just for our lawyers or for legal, but really, knowledge workers and workers in general, you have to get the work done, right? And so
Yeah.
the work is going to get done. If you have more tools at your disposal that can help you get there, I think that helps people, and you have
Right.
to find what works for you.
I think there's some sort of metaphor about life in there too. Like,
Yeah.
you can't let the fear of failing stop you from trying. And so I think that's sort of the mindset that the people that are the most successful with these tools and building and experimenting, it's because they push on and they learn despite not having all these perfect outcomes along the way.
Right. That's such a great point, Stephanie. And one thing, Sarah, you said sticks with me is you are the R&D department. And that's how I feel everybody should think about AI. I am a researcher. This is a tool that's going to allow me to be creative, and it's going to allow me to be more, to explore more. And on the Rift, when I was sort of thinking about what should be the mission is exploration. Pure. Everybody can be an explorer with these tools. And that's really the most effective way of learning it. The other thing I think I'll mention this, and I see this across in all professions and people in all generations, is there's a perception of this tool, which is we know that it's going to change everything in the world. So right now, people almost think that, oh, this is going to give me the most perfect answer and save me 40 hours a week and do it for me, which is not the case. It's just not, we're not there yet. And I would doubt if we would ever get there. So I tell people, I'm like, you're the pilot. This is just the co-pilot. Use it the ways that makes you better. Use it in ways that makes your life easier, frees up time to actually think more strategically, brainstorm, ideate, so on and so forth. So on that note, what's one of the biggest misconceptions you think lawyers have about AI?
Well, I'll tell you, I think that what I'm finding, and I find myself falling into this trap too, but to your point where they imagine it's going to do everything, it's going to do the whole task from start to finish perfectly the first time. But it's even more than that. I think a lot of our users expect, the tool will know how to go to other platforms and other tools and gather the right information. And there's this sort of interconnected world that we've set up already.
Right.
We're not, the hope is we'll get there, but as of right now, we're not there yet. And so I see a lot of our users trying to go, from 0 to 100. And it's like, like to Stephanie's point earlier, let's build the basic muscle, the basic skills, do level 1, and yeah, you'll get to level 2, 3, 4, 5 probably pretty quickly. But to expect that the models are going to be able to do everything in the first shot and be connected to all of the different repositories, we're just not there yet. And it's putting the cart before the horse.
Yep. And I think that's important to understand, and everybody remember these quick wins add up, and you get better at using it as you use it more, and you start using it for more complicated things. So Stephanie, in your perspective, how are clients influencing the pace of AI adoption in the legal industry?
I mean, I think that clients are the accelerant, really,
Right.
honestly, especially for my particular firm. And our clients are the ones building these tools and they use them every day and they're very well versed in them. But I think in general, sophisticated clients are more and more expecting law firms to leverage these tools and make the practice of law more efficient and faster.
Right. Right. And I think that applies to every industry as well. If you're working with clients
Yeah,
who are sort of on the edge of technology, then it
sure.
almost becomes your responsibility to keep up and understand what's going on.
Yes.
The other thing I tell everybody is there's, this thing can change the world for the better, or there's a fear that it can change the world for the worse.
Yeah.
And with both things in perspective, knowing this tool is the best thing we can do. If this is something that is going to change the world for better or for worse, either situation, you should know it very well. And it's
Yes.
going to put us in an advantage if we do.
Yes, for sure. And it is just a tool. And I've said this before, but I do think Gen AI gets vilified a bit. And at the end of the day, it's a tool. It can be used for good or for bad. And it just depends on the human user behind it.
Right. All right. So things are moving fast. We're all trying to sort of hang on to this and keep up and build skills as we go. I can't even imagine what we're going to see next year. So let's say we want to look 5 years ahead. How do you expect AI to reshape the legal profession? Steph, why don't you go first and then Sarah?
That's an easy question. Just kidding. No, that's a very challenging question. And I think that, I read something, it makes me think of, I read something the other day, and it was talking about how the titles like chief AI officer and the equivalent, they're going to become obsolete over time. And it's not because AI is any less important, but I think to the contrary, it's just going to be so fundamental to everything that we do that you're not going to need a chief AI officer, because it's not going to be a specialized function. I think it's actually going to be all of our responsibilities to use it appropriately. I think that's the future. The future is just AI is everywhere and it's integrated into all of our workflows. That's, the biggest crystal ball prediction I can give at this time.
Wow. That's pretty cool, actually. Sarah, what do you think?
Yeah, so it's, I think about it a lot. And I think if you go back 3 years ago now, we were all thinking within a year or two, we're going to see transformation, not just in the legal industry, but everywhere, the whole world. And, we're 3 years in and everyone's still trying to figure it out. And so I think it's going to take a bit longer than we imagined to get to sort of utopia where AI is everywhere and doing everything all at once. But I do think in 5 years, we'll have different operating systems. We'll have different ways that we're approaching work. I think we'll have more voice inputs, more sort of listening devices, things that are sort of watching what we're doing and assisting us. Not in a creepy way, could be in a creepy way, but, watching what you're doing, understanding your workflow, and really helping support that, anticipating the needs before. And so it'll be less of a world of prompting and more of a world of where you're being sort of fed the information that you need at the time that you need it without as much of a heavy lift from the user. And so I'm hopeful that things will, and it will just be a world where everything is moving a lot more smoothly, and sort of that admin time that you waste on opening a new interface, searching for what you're looking for, putting it into another application, that all that friction will be less. Because the systems will all be interconnected in such a way that they'll understand the mechanisms behind how the systems work and how the users work, and marry those two in a way where you'll just have a sort of seamless workflow with technology.
It's such a fantastical theme to think about. Both things that you ladies mentioned, like Stephanie, you said, it's going to be such a natural thing. It will be ubiquitously used by everybody in any way they choose to use it without having to specifically focus on it as a tool. And then Sarah, you mentioned it will be so interconnected and you'll be able to access and work on information very intuitively and naturally, and it can pull information from other sources and sort of help you do things faster without friction in the user journey. And those are, I think, holy grails of AI app development. And I honestly feel this chat interface thing is going to take a back step and voice is going to start coming in. We're all going to have a personal Jarvis like Iron Man does, which knows everything about us. Now, there's a lot of responsibility that comes in such a situation like that, both by on part of the model makers as well as the user. I want to believe positively that, yes, that's possible in a way that pushes human potential, doesn't diminish it. So I myself am looking through that as well. And I have to share this anecdote because how technology has changed all professions like legal. Sarah, you were talking about TAR and e-discovery. And one of my past jobs, I was selling e-discovery software. This was the first time I ever did to large-scale Fortune 100, Fortune 500 scale companies. So I had to understand how lawyers use it, And what I did was I watched a bunch of John Grisham movies to understand how lawyers work with data. And I would watch these movies from the where they have boxes and files of lawyers just going through it with markers and taking notes. And I thought to myself, how did they do this before technology discovery existed? And now that probably condensed time taken for review down by in an exponential fashion. Now, then you layer on LLMs or any kind of generative AI technology, that opens up an entire world of opportunity where things can be done differently. So 5 years from now, if the themes we're talking about come true, and then it's just a fantastic award I'm excited about, a little scared. And I hope that we hold the people, the model makers, responsible for having those guardrails. And just like you ladies mentioned, handhold people through this process so they know how they can be better and enhance their potential, not necessarily diminish it. To finish our conversation, we're going to do a rapid fire, and you have to answer whatever comes to your mind first. All right, here's the first question.
Hold on, let me spin up my chat GPT.
Yeah, we're not prepared. We need our AI to augment these responses. I'm just kidding. Go for it. We're ready.
That is funny. That is really funny. All right, so first one. Favorite AI tool and why?
Oh, you're like asking me to pick a favorite child. I am going to say whatever best solves my use case. I'm not picking just one.
Fantastic. Sarah?
GPT.
Okay, great. Biggest time saver AI has given you?
I like to use it for 50 state comparisons for your surveys and such, and also at grocery shops, so it feeds my family.
Awesome. How about you, Sarah?
Finding restaurants so I don't have to cook for my family.
Oh, yeah, that's a good one too.
All right. One thing AI will never replace in law.
Human emotional connection relationships.
Fantastic.
I have to second that.
Yeah.
Awesome. Now, this is the grand finale. If you could design one AI capability for legal practice that doesn't exist today, what would it be?
I think it would be something that would know exactly which tool I needed for what, and it could proactively select it for me and give me the first draft.
Fantastic. Sarah?
Oh, it's a hard one to go second. So I would create a workflow tool that followed all of your interactions on every application and added and removed what was on your to-do list, but also providing all the content that you would need to perform those tasks.
That is awesome. I just got a bunch of product ideas to build for the legal profession.
We'll send you our bill, our consulting bill.
You got it. This conversation has been very insightful, and I have learned a lot. And I was very inspired by the fact that how you go out of your comfort zone to use these new tools, experiment, go find information. And one thing that is clear from today's conversation is AI isn't here to replace lawyers, but to strengthen them, to give them the ability and mind space to focus on the human interaction part of the legal profession. We've talked about how it can automate menial tasks, how it can save lawyers time through different sort of workflows and create more space for strategy and human advocacy. Big thank you to you ladies. Thank you so much for being guests on today's video and sharing your experiences so openly. And if you want to stay ahead in what's the latest in AI, Web3, and quantum, give us a like and subscribe because we have a lot more cool content coming. Until then, stay curious and keep asking.